Welcome to the second ever episode of the EmpowerLA podcast, the podcast where we discuss all things neighborhood council with the people who live, work, and play in the city of LA. I'm your host, Brett Shears, from the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to our first episode. We got a lot of positive feedback, so if you haven't gotten a chance to hear it, you can find a link to it in the show notes along with other useful information related to this episode. Our guest for today's episode is Joy Atkinson, the new president of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, aka BONC. Joy is a lifelong Angeleno with a talent for community outreach. She has a long and distinguished resume, working at various levels of government in service to the residents of South Los Angeles. She was a founding board member of the Olympic Park Neighborhood Council and is now in her 5th year as commissioner at the BONC. In our conversation, Joy speaks candidly about what it takes to be a successful public servant, neighborhood council board member, and ultimately a great community leader. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Joy, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to come to the EmpowerLA offices and talk a little bit about neighborhood councils. So just for a little context, you are the kind of incoming president of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. We'll get to that in a little second. But first, I'm curious. I want to hear a little bit about your background. So tell me a bit about who you are, where you're from, maybe where you were born and grew up, and how you got to this point in your career.
I'm here because I firmly believe in civic engagement. My family has always been involved in politics, in community organizing, in community in involvement in many, many social and nonprofit organizations. So I was born and raised in LA, in Los Angeles, and my father was born in Los Angeles.
Which parts of LA?
My grandmother was born in Los Angeles, so I'm a third generation.
Which parts of LA were they all from?
Right in the central area of Los Angeles. If I did it by neighborhood council, it would have been in the old days the Olympic Park Neighborhood Council.
Oh, great.
And we actually lived. We never really moved from the area. The generation just kept staying in the same area. So it would be the Country Club Park area, what's now known as Koreatown, and we moved a little bit further west. So anyway, that's where I was raised. My father was very active in organizations, the NAACP, and a lot of other organizations, and he actually ran for the city council when I was 12.
Wow.
And he lost by only 1,500 votes, and it was the great 10th district where Tom Bradley ran the next time and won. So that's my little background on just my family background. I went to USC and did sociology and became a probation officer, but got active in the union, so I always had that political thing in my mind.
Right.
And then when my friend Gwen Moore ran for the state assembly and won, she asked me to come and work for her.
Oh,
and I did for many years. And again, my specialty was community outreach and dealing with organizations. So when the neighborhood council theory came into being and came into fruition, I actually was on the Olympic Park Neighborhood Council. I was one of the founders.
Oh, okay.
But then I left. I moved. That was number one. And number two, I got really active with Mark Ridley Thomas and his Empowerment Congress. And, he had started in the city and then he went to the state and the county. So I went and worked with him on civic engagement and empowerment. So I've always been into it. And then when we got out of the legislature, when Gwen Moore got out of the legislature, I worked a little while for Karen Bass. But when Gwen Moore actually started her business, it was a community outreach business. We got hired to do community outreach on different kinds of projects. So I always kept in contact with the community. So it was real easy to be appointed to this commission. And when I was new to the commission, but when I went to meetings, I knew the people.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like obviously you have a deep history in the community, several communities. But let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about the Empowerment Congress. Talk about the founding of Olympic Park. What was the civic landscape like in LA at that time? What do you remember about LA? What do you remember about the politics? What do you remember about the people? What did it take to really do things like you're talking about? The Empowerment Congress. Who was a part of that? What was?
Well, it was really, really neighborhood oriented, and it really was made up of the people who lived, worked, or owned property. Right. I'm thinking as the neighborhood council movement became more reputable and more people became interested, then other special interests started coming in and the neighborhood council movement grew. But when it first formed and when the Olympic Park Neighborhood Council first formed, it was very neighborhood oriented. And but it was a whole lot of paperwork to get it done, to get it implemented.
Yeah.
But I think it's not nearly like the paperwork that's due now.
Well, do you remember some of the things you had to do?
Well, thank God it was the president of the organization or the founder who actually brought us all together or sent out the notice if we wanted to come. And so he had to do all the work, but he, would come back and report about everything that had to be done. Mr. Grimes was the president. He's a nice guy. He worked hard on getting it all in place. But what I remember being very neighborhood oriented, a little bit different than now. The Olympic Park Neighborhood Council, I remember it being very ethnically diverse. That neighborhood was very diverse, but made up of people who'd been there for a long time. So it took a few years for the population to really change, and more ethnicities got involved as it got older, right, as it was in for a while. And so the landscape was, and then I also found in our neighborhood council, actually toward the time I was leaving, as it was growing, I could see that there were difficulties coming in that so many different people were interested in the neighborhood council movement, and they all had their own interests. Yeah. And so it was difficult trying to bring everything together. And I knew it had lost its strictly neighborhood characteristic and became more global. And folks were there for different reasons. Developers joined if they lived in the area, though they also joined because they wanted to build here, or somebody else wanted to build a whole bunch of restaurants and somebody else didn't like it, or folks were moving in and wanting to change the neighborhood. And it was hard to bring people together who were of the older generation with the younger generation, those who've been there a long time. So it was changing quite a bit. Then I moved.
Well, tell me about, so you're harkening back to this, what the landscape was like then. How do you contrast that with now? You talked about it was very neighborhood oriented. Yeah. What does it look like now? And what's the civic landscape of Los Angeles more generally like now?
It's so much bigger. I mean, it's a gigantic place. And that's why I really love the neighborhood council, because they've come up with, this is a system where you have a city as huge as Los Angeles, and there's a system that says, well, let's break it down into neighborhoods and let's work at it from that point. And I think that's really a unique idea. Instead of trying to think globally, I had a friend that had a saying, actually Assemblywoman Gwen had a saying, bloom where you're planted, which means, do what you can where you are. And I thought it was a great concept, and I still think it's a great concept. To do that. So what I see, though, and I hope to address it, is the fact that folks come in for different reasons, except for the one reason that they all should be there for, which is to improve the community, right, and to learn how to compromise. And I think it takes leadership development. I think we need to do more of that.
Well, what do you think the neighborhood councils fit into this City of LA, the politics of the City of LA? What you talked about implicitly some of the roles that they have, but how do they interact with the government? How do they interact with the other elected officials, even at the higher levels? Well,
that's the whole purpose. I mean, the charter says when they put the neighborhood councils into existence, they had, as far as I was concerned, two main things. Get your citizens involved in your organization in a neighborhood council. Come one, come all. Learn about government. Learn about how the system works. And number two, interface with your government departments, your city council people, and learn how to bring services to your community. That's two things. Get people involved, bring services to your community. If you think of that as a goal, then they play a very important part in the development of the neighborhoods, in in the existence of elected officials. Unless elected officials think you don't have an important part, that may not pay attention. But once you get your numbers together and once you can present coherent ideas on what you want in your community, people listen. I represent, we're talking about being the president of the commission, but I represent South Los Angeles.
Yes.
And the city council people in South Los Angeles respect their neighborhood councils very much and meet with them regularly. Staff come to the neighborhood council meetings. And so there's a good relationship there. And so the neighborhood councils can influence their elected officials on what needs to be done. And the only thing that I see is that the neighborhood council gets so bogged down in paperwork. They do listen to the city council people, but they get so bogged down in the paperwork and keeping their treasury together and doing everything that they have to do. Sometimes they don't interface with the departments as much as they should. But the neighborhood council also has in existence the budget advocates who work very hard on the city budget and trying to bring resources to the community. So I think the neighborhood council movement has a very important role to play as long as they learn how to get along with each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about, you said something like getting your numbers together, meaning, are you saying that neighborhood councils serve as an organizing tool for the neighborhoods?
They serve as an organizing tool, but you have to do the outreach and you have to learn the techniques. I'm not quite sure it's all in place because a neighborhood council represents no less, around 20,000 people.
Yeah, with very few exceptions.
Yeah, very few exceptions, around 20,000 people. Sometimes they go up as high as 50,000 or more. Yeah. But if you go to a meeting, 40 people might show up. Mm-hmm. So they have to learn to do that outreach. Some people don't even realize what neighborhood council they live in, and they may live in a very active neighborhood council. So it's a matter of leadership and playing an even more important role by saying, we have this many people that are in our neighborhood council. If folks don't see it, they don't have the respect that they should. But some neighborhood councils are fabulous and can turn out people, from every corner of their area. Yeah. But it's a technique, and you have to learn it. And some neighborhood councils need help on that. And that's what a couple of us on the commission now want to look at policy and how do we help these neighborhood councils do a little bit more as far as outreach and stabilizing their neighborhood councils. So,
well, that's great. I mean, that brings me exactly to my next point. One, I want to ask more generally first is where do you think and how do you feel the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners fits into the neighborhood council system? We know that it's the civilian mayoral appointed policy body of the neighborhood councils, but just in terms of your day-to-day functions, how you get along, how you interact with other things, how does the BONC, the BONC, sometimes people call it, fit into this ecosystem?
Because we are the policy-making body, we have to look at all aspects of the neighborhood council movement and deal with policies that affect them. Oftentimes, I'm trying to think of some examples. There was a time when the neighborhood council said something has to be done. We have to know how we can, when they don't always get along, how do we bring a grievance? How do we complain about the election process of our board? How do we complain about each other? How do we complain about anything? And we said, we need to look at a grievance procedure. Then where you can bring your grievances to the department and it can be adjudicated. So we did put in a policy that said, okay, we're going to establish a grievance procedure, which we have done. Now we've got to go to the next step. What happens if you don't follow the grievance procedure? Right. But right now we do have a grievance procedure. We wanted to make some of the bylaws uniform. A little bit uniform. We leave bylaws to the neighborhood councils, but there's some things that they're required to do simply because they get money from the city. So so they're part of the city by having a budget and getting money. They're part of the city, so they have to follow certain rules. So we had to okay the contracts for how elections are implemented. We had to okay the contracts for how they were going to do the banking and how they were going to do the process of working with treasuries. So we're kind of the policy making arm, and then it's administratively supervised by the Department of Empowerment.
And you talk about what you personally are driven by in a lot of this, and you have a passion for leadership. You've talked about it a lot. You've done a lot of extracurricular presentations for the department, for the various entities in the neighborhood council system, promoting leadership. Why is leadership so important in neighborhood councils?
We were just I was just talking about this with Councilman Rue yesterday, the other day, with our co-chair, Eli Lippman. And what we find is that people run for these neighborhood council positions for whatever reason. Some it may be to help the community, but sometimes just to promote whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. And they have no idea what that entails. They have no idea of the amount of work that goes into either being the president, being the treasurer, being the secretary, and posting the minutes. And the neighborhood councils have a period where you can come in and you can learn about what all those things are that you have to do to be an effective member of the board, but it's not mandatory.
Right.
And the people don't have to come. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at something that says, this should be mandatory. It's like if you run for office, you got to get 25 signatures to run if you're running for city council, or you have to get, you have to pay, or you have to do something. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to us that if you are going to run for a neighborhood council, and if you're going to show any kind of leadership, you got to understand what you're running for. You need to go to that training.
Is part of the tension that because the barriers to participation are so low that sometimes people default into leadership positions without necessarily taking the steps to really become a leader? You're talking about the things that you need to do sometimes.
It could be, they rush out, the neighborhood councils rush out, we got to fill these positions.
Yep.
And they, talk their friends mm-hmm. or someone into running, and then they come and then they have somewhere they aren't able to fill the positions by election time, so there's an appointment procedure. Mm-hmm. So you really, get folks that just don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And so the leadership but the leadership comes in not only knowing the rules, which you do have to take those kind of trainings, but leadership to me means let's teach folks how to get along. How do you assess people's abilities? How do you avoid conflicts? What are the reasons that conflicts come up? Really talk about a leadership development program. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always talk about. And because I run a program like that on the campus of USC for African American women, it's a leadership program and public policy instruction. It's learn about yourself, do an assessment on your talents. Once you do an assessment on your talents, you can recognize talents in other people. And it's an interesting leadership technique that I think would help the neighborhood councils. Neighborhood councils, I had one neighborhood council, and they just didn't get along with each other and don't get along with each other. And it's like they need an intervention that says, okay, you don't get along, but what is it that you agree on? You
Right.
have to talk about those sort of things too.
Just really quick on leadership again. We talk about it more generally, but what are some of the qualities? What are some of the qualities that neighborhood council people on neighborhood councils that they can embody, and how can they express those qualities of good leadership through the neighborhood council system? What are some of the things that you look for to a really good leader?
I look for a person that listens, mm-hmm. that also has a vision, that comes forward with good ideas, but wants to listen to people about what their ideas are. And sometimes, if you're the president or you're the leader of the organization, then maybe other people's priorities should take center stage over yours, just to be able to get folks to work together and to have a leader has to recognize what are our commonalities and oftentimes we don't take the time to do that. We're so busy let's do the administrative part. Let's run the neighborhood council. But you have to step back sometime and figure out, what can I do to make these people work together? And it really is listening to what their concerns are.
Yeah, so the neighborhood council is really the board members, the forum itself is an opportunity to listen to what's the people
what's
think,
going
right?
on,
and your
and your leader
and,
is very important. The chairman is very important. Your vice presidents are very important, and then how you use the rest of your members.
Okay, so you are the new president
Mm-hmm.
of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you want to see happen? What we have the way the neighborhood council system is right now. What are some things you want to see it do better? What are some improvements you really want to talk about? You've touched on some of them, but if you want to elaborate on any of it.
Yeah, we've talked about it so much in the last few minutes. What I really see is a couple of things. I think neighborhood councils, and I'm not quite sure. I have to look at how to do this, but neighborhood councils need more help in the running of the neighborhood councils. They have assistants.
In the administrative aspect.
An administrative aspect. In my area, they need to do a little bit better on their website. Mm-hmm. They need to, know
communications
how to
more generally.
communicate.
Right?
Yeah, they need to communicate better. But the techniques are all there, and the capabilities are there. It's just doing it. And sometimes folks are intimidated by the website, or they're intimidated, and they don't really need to be. And I think maybe our staff at the department needs to somehow help with that. And I have to look and see what specifics I would like to see. But it takes a very long time to answer questions. So I've heard complaints from our president or from secretaries or whatever that they want to get an answer on how to proceed on a matter, and they feel like it takes a very long time to get an answer. So I want to look at the administration and how we can handle issues a little bit more quickly. I think that's important. And then back to harping on what we really want to put into place, and I was talking to some other members of the commission, is we really want to put in place a policy that says anybody running for office must take the leadership training, must take training, and on coming to the training and finding out what their position entails.
Right. So that's the minimum to even really get involved.
You've got to come and take the training. You can't just say, I'm going to sign up and do it and then show up on vote day.
And anecdotally, I've heard a lot of that from people at the department. They say you don't articulate enough what it takes, and therefore we get some people. And I do see a tension in that maybe they use it as a tool to stifle some activity, but at the same time, there's a lot of truth to it. So I get exactly what you're saying.
And the other issue that we talked to Councilman Rue about, and again, I don't know how we can approach this because it takes money, but what we're finding in this outreach for voting, we want, it's real important to get a good turnout for voting, and sometimes we do. But we tell the neighborhood councils to do it. It's up to the neighborhood councils to get this outreach going. But then you got people who are in the neighborhood council who hold office, and it might be against their interest to be going out looking for new people to come in, so they kind of sometimes stifle that a little bit, or get their friends to come, or they don't do the outreach that they should. And we actually have talked to Councilman Rue about, where is the money? Where does the department take over outreach a little bit more? They do the elections, but then maybe they need to actually do the outreach to the public a little bit more. Because you're going to get, why would a person who has a special interest of remaining in their office go out and do outreach and recruit somebody else to run for their office?
Recruiting your opponent. Yeah, that's a consistent issue. I mean, we just think about it logically. Of course, there's a lot of inconsistency there.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, so the department has on and off during your tenure, the department has run the elections, or at least played a major role in the election. This year, it's going completely over the city clerk in terms of administration, but we're still tasked with outreach. So what can we do, right? What can we do to bring in the candidates? I think that's a really important issue. I wanted to ask you, so how long have you been on the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners now?
I've been on since Mayor Garcetti first got elected.
So sometime in 2013,
It was 2013, but it was in November. He was elected in the summer.
So late 2013. Okay. So you're going on 4 years now. You've done this term. Now you're
I was finishing up someone's term, and I actually got last year got a 5-year term.
Yes, great. Okay. So now I just wanted you to look back for a little bit. It's only been 4 years, but what have been some notable successes that you've had at the the neighborhood commissioners, or just your work in the city as an appointed official? What have been some successes with the neighborhood council system that you've seen?
Even though I think neighborhood councils probably could improve on their mechanics of how they deal with their websites, I have seen a vast improvement in communications and in the development of webs. It might not be where it should be, but it's a lot different than when I first came on. And so the websites are really getting developed. Now when you ask someone, do you have a website, they can say yes. And it used to be that they couldn't all say yes.
Yep.
Or that they weren't all inputting what they should on the web. And it's even gotten to the point now where they're getting picky and they want to have the correct person that's going to help them put their web together. So that's a great thing, because that's communication. The other idea, me personally, I've just gotten to know my area so much. Even though I knew a lot of people, I've gotten to know them so much more. And I find that my neighborhood councilors are pretty active. They have some of these same problems on leadership and maybe sometimes getting along with each other, but it doesn't seem to be as pronounced as in some other areas. And I think it's because they have good relationships with their city council people. And I think that's really good. I think I've helped on that a little bit. I hope I have, because each of the city council people that represent the area that I represent, I've known them for years. And can call and can ask questions and find out things that the presidents may want to not know who to talk to there. So I feel that that's a good accomplishment, that everybody kind of knows everybody now.
Well, those are a couple of important successes. You're talking about better communication, better collaboration. What have been some notable setbacks? What are some things that you saw yourself, either through your lens or just the neighborhood council system as a whole, take a step back? Where had we not really lived up to where we should have?
I think what we've been talking about for this whole interview, folks just getting along with each other, special interests coming. Now that the neighborhood council, it's really interesting, now that the neighborhood council kind of is legitimate in that it's part of the city family, as we say, people see a purpose in being active in the neighborhood council. And sometimes that can cause a problem because new people are coming in and they want to kind of take over. They have their special interests, or they're developers, or they're whatever they are. And so I'm seeing this, that's why I'm seeing this leadership problem and folks getting along with each other, and it's kind of growing. And so we need to see a little bit of improvement on, maybe these folks have forgot what their purpose was.
Right. What's one thing you want the community of neighborhood councils and the community maybe at large to understand that they don't? Like, there's a misperception about something.
That is really hard. I've done a couple of workshops for the department. The department came up with an idea about, since we have these neighborhood councils and people are interested in them, some folks come to neighborhood councils because they may want to run for office.
Higher office, right?
For higher office. They themselves may want to run for city council. Some of them are influenced by the fact that our city controller was a neighborhood council person, or city councilman Rue was a neighborhood council person. So some folks may be influenced by that. But folks don't understand that you don't just up and run for office. And I find that they're very surprised at the amounts of money it takes to run for a city council office. And I'm thinking that I always wanted to, in fact, I think I have mentioned to the department, maybe they need to understand how to run their neighborhood councils first before they decide they want to run for office. And I can understand jumping to that because that's why people do it. But they're so surprised when you tell them how much money it takes to run for office. And they're so shocked. And then they want to take money out of politics. And until that's voted by somebody, it's not going to happen. And so people are not realistic, I don't think, on how government works and how you get into government. They think all of us who are appointed to commissions, pay to play, that we must have given a big donation in order to be appointed to a job that we don't even get paid for.
Mm-hmm.
I always, when they ask what a commissioner does, I sit down and I always say, first of all, I have not given one dime in a campaign contribution to Mayor Garcetti. And I always say that I worked, campaigned and said, vote for Mayor Garcetti because we have personal friends. But I never gave any money, never have. And many times when we have these meetings, other commissioners say, no, we've never given any money. It's a misconception. Some maybe do, but a lot don't.
Right.
So I think people need to understand government a little bit better.
Yeah, it's very resource intensive. We're talking about these large enterprises, a city council staff, being able to do all the work that they do.
Yeah.
I think that's
the
clear.
very important point they need to understand is, first of all, get all these misconceptions out the way. And second of all, if you want anything done, it takes numbers. And you got to do the outreach. You got to get the folks active and pick an issue and develop it.
Right. Well, we're going to close up a little bit, but I just wanted to close by asking a couple simple questions. What is the word empowerment? Because that's really what this department's about. That's what a lot of the neighborhood council system's about. What does that word mean to you?
Empowerment means place yourself in a state of opportunity where you can make a difference. And where you can work with others and do it on your own and not wait for somebody to tell you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Empowerment is taking the bull by the horns and saying, this is what needs to be done. And I want to know how to do it. I want to be empowered. Show me those techniques and I'll do it. And that's what I think empowerment is. And we don't spend enough time talking about that either, I think.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts at all?
No, I think we've covered everything because I can't harp on leadership
You
enough.
covered the gauntlet.
I can't harp on that enough and can't harp on misconceptions of neighborhood councils.
Well, we'll see you out there pushing leadership, developing more leaders in this system.
Yeah.
And you've got a large pool of people, 1,800 board members to cultivate.
And I'm hoping that when we have our board meetings, when they're out in the community or when they're down here at City Hall, that more people show up.
Well, we'll all encourage them to do that. Joy, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. You have a good day now.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the EmpowerLA podcast. As always, you can learn more about the Neighborhood Council system at EmpowerLA.org, where you can find information about Joy Atkinson and her fellow commissioners on the BONC. You can check out our show notes for this episode if you want to learn a bit more about the topics and people we discussed. The EmpowerLA podcast is now available on iTunes, so if you are so inclined, please leave us a review so we can get the word out about neighborhood councils. Thank you so much for your support.